All right, I've gone through the regulator side with the starter generator that I have marked as okay. It may not be okay because I did swap out the regulator with a known good one and it's still not charging. So before I take that one out, I want to find one in my stash that is actually good. I know that this one's good, but it's noisy. So we may pop this one apart and see what we've got as far as what's causing the noise. All right. But before we do that, I wanted to show you guys, this is the original starter generator for that Sears. I wanted to show you just how trashed the brushes and brush holders are in this. It's the first time I've popped it apart. If we look here, that brush there is completely gone. Should look like this. Okay, but it doesn't. It is completely gone. This brush, there's still a little bit there, but see how mauled up that is? And it no longer has the spring catch, which is right there. The spring catch has flipped around to the other side and it has chewed up that commutator something awful. So I'm going to slide the whole frame off and show you guys what's going on in there and explain a few things about it, because I have a lot of people asking me about these starter generators. I figured it was high time that I go ahead and get inside one and get you guys up close and personal with the inner workings, what to do and what not to do with the starter generator. So take the rear bearing plate off. That's the rear bearing plate. This one has an actual bearing. Sometimes they only have bushings. If they only have bushings, you have 3 different positions where, depending on how this starter generator is going to be oriented, will determine which of these gets drilled, and then a wick is put in, an oil-soaked wick is put in, and then either an oiling cap, spring-loaded oiling cap, like that right there. See how it's got a wick in there? So it's either going to look like that, or it'll just have a plug that's been pushed in there. There is a way to just look at the rear of the cap and know if it's got a bushing or a bearing. Obviously, with this big sort of Welsh type plug, we've got a bearing. There's also a bearing on the front side, but it could also be a bushing. They made them in all different shapes and sizes. So let's pull the frame off here. Frame comes off very easily once you have that back plate off, and the only thing that holds everything together are 2 long bolts. And also, if you look at the frame, there's a pin, a locating pin right there. That is so that when you're locating your cap and putting your cap on, it gets placed on there with a little slot. So that would just go on there and those pins would line up just like that. And that's the way it is on the back. And then on the front, the pin is here, and then your little slot is on the face plate of your bearing. And what a mess. Wear gloves unless you want to be wearing a whole bunch of carbon well, I say it's carbon, but what these are actually made of, a lot of people don't know, these are actually made of copper and cornstarch as a binding agent. Or in the old days, it was copper and a type of carbon, and just they're formed under high pressure. But you can kind of see the coppery looking color on that. So these are probably the carbon copper, and then the later ones, like in modern day starters, it's a copper and cornstarch composition. So let's take a look at this armature. It's beautiful. Got bits and pieces falling all over it. We'll look at this in a second. Look how chewed up that commutator is. All these marks here, all those marks. See, the bearings are great. The armature tested out okay on this, so the armature is okay. We just need to chuck this up in the lathe and clean the commutator up real good before reassembling and reusing this. And we do have a bearing in the front as well, which you can tell by the 3 screws that are holding the bearing in place there. So bearing on the front and the back, and this bearing feels pretty good. The bearing that usually gets the most wear on these is the front one. That's because this is where you've got your lateral pressure with your belt. As you tighten the armature down to get the belt tight enough, you're putting lateral pressure on those bearings. So the bushing cap types, the bushings fail a lot sooner, especially if they're not maintained. Like I said, they will have an oil cap like that. So let's take a look here at our frame. Now inside the frame you have 2 windings. One is a heavy copper winding, one is a thin copper winding. One side is for charging, the other side is for starting. The thing that you do not ever want to do with these is mess with these screws on the side of the frame, because these actually, I used to remanufacture these. You actually have to assemble this in a fixture that perfectly aligns the inner shoes. Those are actually called shunts. Let me get a flashlight and show you a little better what that looks like in there. That figures. That stupid flashlight is just about worthless. That's why I haven't gotten any more of these through nights. Ugh, just trash. Anyway, let's take a look inside the frame here. You see there's a bunch of carbon up in there, but there's a big piece of metal in there. Let me turn it around, show you the other one. There you can see the metal on that one. Those are shunts, and then wrapped around them are epoxy coated windings, wire windings. This is the large copper wire winding, which is on the start side, so it can handle all that amperage, okay? And then over here on the field side is where your smaller wires are. That's that small diameter wire. It's right there. So that's what's going on inside of here. You have your brush cap, and your brush cap is actually riveted to the side of the case. You have one rivet here, one rivet on the other side, and these little fingers, let me get something to poke it with. These little fingers right here are spring loaded, and so what you do is you stick your it's real easy to set the brushes into these, but all you do is this gets moved back, and the brushes are different too. You have to pay attention to that. One is insulated and the other is just an open bare wire. Open bare wire over here on this side, and then insulated, open bare wire here, insulated here. Make sure you get them right. The insulated is because there's going to be a lot more amperage coming through it, and you don't want this wire to arc anywhere. This one you don't have to worry so much about. But I'll also tell you, when we would test these, they'd come in on a pallet. We'd stick them on a fixture and hook them up, and with them hooked up on the fixture, we would literally whack them with a rawhide mallet quite a few times on the tail cap, and then on the front we would just tap around it to try to free up that carbon and get that carbon to lay down in the bottom of the frame. Because you see, you've got an open area here and an open area here where that carbon can collect out of harm's way. But you know, looking at this armature, it has never rubbed. That armature is not rubbed on anything. You can see the numbers stamped in here. After they were balanced, they would get a number stamp. A machine, it would go through a machine would just number stamp them, sort of like a date code type of kind of thing. But at any rate, excuse me, I don't remember where I was at as far as what was what, but you have one brush that is exposed, one that is insulated. Then you do have auxiliary wires that are running down to the field and start side. You see this right here, just runs down and attaches to the start side, and then you have this one that is soldered in that goes over to the field side. The field uses both brushes to charge. The start side only uses the one brush. So that's what the regulator's for. After you're done starting, the regulator will switch over to charge mode. You have to have 2 circuits to be able to charge. You have to have positive and negative. So this side, although it is positive when it is in the start function, once you let go of the key and the regulator kicks in, then it gives you your positive and negative, your positive here and your negative over here. But it's not. That's why you have to have a voltage regulator, though, is because there's nothing inside these that's regulating. Newer alternators, after they phased out the starter generators, newer alternators still had external regulators until they figured out how to make little diode sets that they could install inside the alternators, so that the alternators were solid state and did not require a regulator. Like you hear a lot of people that use the one-wire GM alternators that are internally regulated or resisted. It's because they're able to use cavities in the housing to mount the chipsets that take care of all the switching to charge and all that kind of stuff. And of course, they're only alternators. They're not starters and alternators, or generators in this case. But that one's obviously trashed. So I'm going to grab this noisy one. I'm going to take the noisy one apart, see if we can't get rid of the rattle and noise that it has. And it's a little on the stiff side too. So we may just need to change the tail caps in order to get this starter generator to behave. And like I say, I do know it's good. It's marked okay. Of course, that one was marked okay as well. Something may have gone awry from the time that it was stored until I put it in here, but it is not charging as of this moment. Once I get a good one ready to go back in, we'll pull that one out and we'll test that one and we'll check that one and see if it is a viable starter generator. So I'll probably split these into 2 parts. So I'll go ahead and cancel this one now. You guys look forward to part 2, where we get in there and work a little bit more on this starter generator situation. It's your friendly neighborhood Zippo. See you when I see you.